A farmer faces a $2.8 million fine for plowing his fields. Think about that. $2.8 million for plowing his fields. What was he growing? He wasn't growing weed, he was growing wheat. How did we get from a war on drugs to a war on farmers growing wheat? Well, I'll tell you how. We're going to talk about that. I want to lay out the details for this first, but you have to understand where we're going here and where we already are. It's essentially like the old stories of Robin Hood, where they had to run from the king even to hunt in the forest because the king owned all the land and all the game on it, and they would hunt you down. Now we have a dictatorship in Washington, and the dictatorship is coming from the bureaucracy. Let's look at what happened here in California. A farmer faces trial in federal court, of course federal, this summer, and a $2.8 million fine for failing to get a permit to plow his field and plant wheat. A lawyer for Duarte Nursery said the case is important because it could set a precedent, you bet it will, requiring other farmers to obtain costly, time-consuming permits just to plow their fields. And the attorney says the case is the first time we're aware of that say that you need to get the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit to plow and to grow crops. This is Anthony Francois, an attorney for the Pacific Legal Foundation. He said, we're not going to produce much food under those kinds of regulations. So what happened? We had a trial already, so to speak, and we'll talk about whether or not it's a trial. A district judge, U.S. district judge, federal judge, agreed with the Army Corps of Engineers in a judgment back in last June. Now they're looking at a penalty trial. And this is where they're talking about coming after $2.8 million in civil penalties. And understand, civil is the key here. We're going to talk about the difference between civil and criminal and what that means in terms of the way the bureaucracy looks at your rights, which they don't think exist. The case began in 2012. This man bought 450 acres, so it's not a large area here, but they're going to hit him with nearly $3 million. They say the property has numerous swales and wetlands. He hired a consulting firm to map out areas on the property that were not to be plowed because they were part of drainage for Coyote and Oat Creeks and were considered to be waters of the United States. That's a very important phrase. What they mean by that is waters of the EPA. The EPA is taken possession during the Obama administration of all of the waters in the United States. And we've seen egregious results from this. So let's get back to the details of this. He conceded that some of the wetlands were plowed, but he said they were not significantly damaged, that it was shallow where he got out of the lines. And the Army didn't claim that he violated the Endangered Species Act by destroying fairy shrimp or their habitat. Fairy shrimp are there. Okay, so let's be careful of the fairy shrimp. The wheat was planted, but it was not harvested because the Army Corps of Engineers in California stopped work at the site. He sued them, saying they had violated his constitutional right of due process. See, they assessed a penalty by stopping him in an economic activity prior to giving him a day in court. And this is another characteristic that we see all the time. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. And so he tried to get them to allow him to, he sued them to continue on with his work. So then they came after him big time with the Clean Water Act violation. And they point out farmers plowing their fields are specifically exempt from the Clean Water Act rules that forbid discharge materials in the United States waters, the EPA's waters. They say that the government's case is that even under farming exemption, a discharge that impairs the flow of water into the U.S. still requires a permit. And yet, the lawyer representing him says a plain reading of the rules says you don't need a permit to do what he did. How do you impose a multi-million-dollar penalty on someone for thinking the law says what it says? The law says what it says. They don't care what the law says. They don't care what the Clean Waters Act says. They don't care what the Constitution of the United States says. But it gets worse. In addition to the civil penalties, the attorney's office is also asking the judge to not only repair the wetlands, but to purchase other wetlands. So they want him to buy other wetlands that he can then hold, not use, but pay taxes on forever to penalize him. Give him this white elephant that he has to feed. So let's look at what's happening here. Number one, there's no due process. They're saying that they're taking a civil action. That's the key. Just as we see civil asset forfeiture in the drug war, and none of you cared about that because it was to stop drugs. It hasn't stopped drugs in 46 years, but we continue with this insanity. What it has stopped is the rule of law. But you signed on to the civil asset forfeiture idea, the idea that because this was not a crime, the government could come after you and take your property even without charging you with a crime, let alone finding you guilty. And so when they say that something is civil, and everything that the EPA or the IRS or the FAA, remember we just had the FAA about a year and a half ago, just before Christmas, I think it was 2015, I'm going on memory. But they said, be careful, all you people who are buying drones, you need to make sure that you have registered those drones. It's not going to be much for you to register them with us, but if we catch you using one and you haven't registered it, we're going to assess a fine of $25,000. Does that seem excessive? Why, of course it is. But they can get away with it because they say you don't have any right to due process, to a trial by your peers, to answer the charges, to see what you're accused of, to call witnesses on your behalf. You don't have a right to a jury trial or any of that, and you don't have a right to be protected from excessive fines. Now, we have had a court come in and say, no, we're not going to let the FAA do that. But understand that every one of these groups, these three-letter federal agencies, come after you and say that they can do whatever they wish without any due process, and it's because it's a civil fine. Now, there's also, as part of that, no prohibition of excessive fines. The idea that he would have to buy extra wetlands just to hold, in addition to a $3 million penalty, and this is only on about 450 acres. This is the insanity of it. And the fact that even though he didn't violate the letter of the law, they're still going to come after him. Because we have abdicated the creation of laws to these federal bureaucrats. The Congress no longer writes the laws. The Congress creates federal bureaucracies, and the bureaucracies write the laws. The bureaucracies come after you. They are the judge, jury, and executioner in the sense of the fines. The law is in their mouth. It's what they think it is. And why wouldn't they think that? They don't have to follow the Constitution. They don't have to stand before the voters. It's regulation without representation, and it is taxation without representation. When is this going to stop? When is it going to stop? What we have is a group of bureaucrats in Washington who do whatever they wish. They make the rules. The rules are whatever they say they are. And when the law is in your mouth, that is the very definition of a dictator. But it's going to get worse. As we saw today, we saw Mark Zuckerberg calling for a universal basic income and saying that he might be thinking about running for president. He says everyone should be paid a universal basic income. And understand, this is like welfare, except it's for everybody. Why are they talking about this? It's because they believe that technology and robots are going to cause massive unemployment. We've seen over and over again projections of 50% of the workforce being displaced in virtually every industry. So it's broad across all industries. It's vertical as well. It goes from the people who are at the lowest levels of the company to the middle managers to the white-collar workers. So it's horizontal and vertical. They're looking at 50% unemployment. What are they going to do with people? How are they going to keep us down on the farm where we can't grow food? Well, they're going to keep us quiet by pacifying us with a universal basic income. They want to make us totally dependent on them. They don't want us to be able to grow our own food. They don't want us to have our own jobs and independence. They want us to be completely dependent upon them. You have to understand, that is what's behind universal basic income. It's a very insidious plan of dependency. We saw just yesterday the black pastor who wants to be another Al Sharpton saying, this is nothing but ethnic cleansing to cut down on our welfare payments and so forth. What do you think you're going to have when you have universal basic income? When everybody gets a fixed amount from the government, you can choose to work or you can choose to not work. There's not going to be any jobs for you. Maybe you can think of something clever like Facebook that everyone needs so dearly and make billions of dollars like Mark Zuckerberg and run for office. This is the dependency. These are the walls that they're building around us, and it's because we do not respect the Constitution, which was set up to protect our individual rights. Well, that's it for tonight's news. Thank you for joining us. Join us every weeknight at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
during this Memorial Day. I want to thank the veterans that have fought, but of course, most importantly, those that have died, because that's what this holiday and remembrance is all about, is those that made the ultimate sacrifice for the belief they were building a better world. Didn't mean every war was good. Didn't mean they didn't get conned. Didn't mean they didn't get used. But I'm here to tell you, they were at least people that were willing to stand up for something. And that's worlds apart from so many of the trendies and globalist wannabes and minions of the establishment that want to take the easy road. Take advantage of these unprecedented specials and help support the tip of the spear in the fight against the globalists while supplies last. Our highest quality, name brand, silver bullet that we private label is already the highest quality and lowest price of what we sell it at. And I've never offered it as a loss leader like I'm about to do at 65% off retail right through next Tuesday. Super Male Vitality's been sold out for months, our #1 best-selling product. I normally just give 25% off. We are doing 30% off Super Male Vitality out of the gates through next Tuesday. Survival Shield, high quality, true nascent iodine, deep earth crystal source, has been sold out. We never offer it at 40% off. It's offered at 40% off for a limited time to, again, celebrate our patriots and celebrate those that died in the service of this great republic. Brain Force, now with 20% more in each bottle, is 47% off. We've, again, never offered it at that. It's a bestseller. It's been sold out. Why am I discounting it? Because I know it's a tough economy out there. I know the globalists have been trying to stop the Trump recovery. And I know this is a powerful product. And so if you try it, I think you're going to continue to want to buy it. Especially if you sign up for auto ship, that's an additional 10% off. When you add that in to 65% off Silver Bullet, it is a loss leader then for sure. You add that to the 30% off Super Male, that's 40% off. You add that to Survival Shield at 40%, that's 50% off. You add that to Brain Force at 47, that's 57% off. You add that to Secret Trouble at 43%, our vitamin B12 Mythical Bottleman, that is 53%. Knockout is at 50%, our Sleep Aid, that's 60%. We've never offered it at that. And all InfoWars Trump shirts are 75% off retail as well to get the word out. These are the biggest sales ever on these items. You add auto ship, several of these are loss leaders. So for myself and the entire InfoWars crew, I salute you and thank you for all your prayers and all your support on this Memorial Day. Hope everybody has a safe weekend coming up. We are at that crossroads.